think you're good.
We should be good. So just so you all know right up front, this evening's meeting's being recorded. We're actually recording it 2 different ways on the hopes that they both come out, but in case one doesn't, the other will work. We're doing it through WebEx, online, and we're using 1643's equipment, and a good friend of mine, Lisa Smith, said, I'll push the button tonight. So we've got some volunteer help. There were too many buttons on that camera for me to figure out. So I want to thank Lisa for that. I'm Eric Hutchins. I'm with the NOAA Restoration Center. I've worked out of the Gloucester office now for about 30 years, well, 28, thereabouts. And I'm the NOAA representative to this case, the Gloucester Harbor coal tar site. And I want to just make just a couple of introductions.
Hold on, I'm not seeing your screen on WebEx.
Oh.
Oh, come now. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you, Brian. So anyway, a couple of quick introductions. Brian Kelder, he's from NOAA, working as co-trustee representing NOAA on this case. And Michelle Craddock, raise your hand, Michelle. Michelle's with Massachusetts DEP, and Whitney Bear from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She drove up from Connecticut for the meeting this evening. So we are the 3 legs to the trustee council working on this case together. Any and all decisions that are made throughout the process of this case, which will turn into years in the end between selection and implementing projects, it's all unanimous. There is no 2 out of 3. It's anything that we do is a combination of the 2 federal agencies and the state of Massachusetts, all the way through from beginning to end. I may be the speaker this evening, but I'm representing all of us here this evening. What I'm going to do is give a slideshow. I'll just give you a quick little outline. I'm going to give a slideshow. And how can you hear me in the back? Am I talking loud? All right. We didn't think I needed a mic. I'm going to do a slideshow of just an outline of the case, what our objectives are, what the timeline is, funding availability, how we'll be doing evaluations. And then following that, I hope everyone got the handout that was at the corner. If not, at the far corner of that table, just as you walked in, was a project nomination sheet. Yeah, that's, in the end, it's just a recycled piece of paper because it doesn't have all the drop downs, but I'm going to walk you through the nomination form. We have a kind of a unique opportunity. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, obviously that had billions of dollars to work with. They created some new online forms that make it easier for the public to participate. And it's a quite easy form to fill out. It populates instantaneously on a map. And you will be able to see what you or your neighbors or other towns, whatever, have nominated for project types to do in this area. So it's very transparent. It's not all a bunch of paper that comes in and we shuffle it. Everything that gets submitted gets entered by us. So I'm going to walk that through with you and do a test run of it, which it'll only take a few minutes. I'll pretend I'm a nominee putting a project idea in for consideration. After that, we'll be open to questions and answers of any type regarding the case and project ideas and discussion. I may not have all the answers. We have other staff here besides Michelle and Brian that may have an answer that none of us have that you may have. And then we'll stay here as long as the questions come in. And then if anyone was interested, and depending on the number of people we had here this evening, we will actually do some I hate to use the word breakout. They're not breakouts. They're truly, if you just want to talk to someone about a question one-on-one, it could be some of your exit ticket for people that want to go home at that point, or if someone wants to really drill in on some questions. We hope to have probably 2 people in each corner, maybe one writing things down, one talking with you. Doesn't matter which corner you go to. It's not salt marshes over here, clams over here, and oysters over there. It's general questions. Come and ask any of us any further questions you have one-on-one, and that'll wrap up the evening. Again, it's being recorded. The meeting, we will work with 1643 to post their film. And, it's what? 23, 43, that's right, it's Gloucester. Our WebEx will be posted as well. And there's probably a fair chance they might get posted on both web pages. So all of this will be available to the public to see this who may have missed it tonight. I can't even remember. Do we even have an idea of how many people?
About 18 online right now, and I just posted this in the chat, but in case the folks online didn't see that, we can't hear them in the room here, so they'll have to submit questions for you via the chat.
Right, yep, and so we've asked, we're asking anyone online that has questions for that question and answer. Brian will be looking at the questions and answers, not the answers, he'll repeat the questions, then I'll do my best to answer the question or direct it to someone here that may be able to help. And it may actually be someone in this room that may have some of the answers to some of the questions rather than us, depending on what some of the questions that may crop up. As a little bit of background, I actually probably know half of you that came here this evening through something in the past, maybe more. For those of you that I don't know, I was born in Gloucester, so I know the Cape Ann area quite well. Been here, 62 years now. So it's kind of exciting for me to work with many of you again on these opportunities. I've already told a number of people, in a number of ways, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. It's unfortunate that it was from a damage case, but there's some significant money available to do good things for the marine environment around the Cape Ann area. Okay, so I'm gonna jump right in. Unless there's something burning, I'd like to hold the questions off to the end. But if something just screams out at you, I'm not going to say no. But otherwise, we'll try to hold them to the end. That is the name of this. It's the Gloucester Harbor Coal Tar Site. Natural Resource Damages Settlement Restoration Planning Process. This is the inception of the restoration planning process this evening. We've had no other public meetings. We've had a couple one-on-ones. I mean, we briefed the mayor about a year ago and said, this is coming. We've told a few people once the settlement actually got in place, but this is the first anything public in this case of any significance. So you're here at the starting point. What I'm also going to touch on as we go through these slides is just to make it a little bit more interactive. The slides in here aren't projects I'm proposing. These are projects that actually many of you worked on with us or with other partners. From left to right, or in the middle there, the Dunfudgeon swimming pool on the Annisquam River. That was a project that was funded actually for some NRD money many years ago. That's right next to the high school. Ripped out that old swimming pool, threw it in a dumpster, and restored some mud flats and a little bit of salt marsh habitat. This is the Sawmill Brook Habitat Restoration Project. Not Sawmill, Millbrook in downtown Rockport in Millbrook Meadow. A beautiful habitat restoration project where we're monitoring eels there with a lot of citizen volunteers. Project at the left, that's Eastern Point, the Eastern Point Culvert Replacement Project that was done with the City of Gloucester working with Mass Audubon. That was probably over 20 years ago. So Cape Ann has had a lot of projects with the Mass Bays program and the state of Mass and NOAA. A lot of projects have been done in this area because there's a lot of interested people. So I'm going to highlight a couple of those tonight, which also help you get a flavor of what we're looking for. We're not looking to do these again at those sites. They're done, but it gives you a little bit of a flavor. Oop. Okay, not sliding through. Okay, what did we do? Maybe it's the first slide.
Broke something else.
What did we do?
Oh, come on now.
Huh. There we go. Boom. Progress. Background. Many of you, I know a little bit of this background, but federal and state laws governing cleanup at waste sites like the Gloucester coal tar site. So for those of you who don't know a little bit of the history here, I'm not going to get into the details in any level other than quite a few years ago now, over a decade ago, probably like 15 years ago, there was just some general maintenance going on the docks in the area of Harbor Loop down by the Coast Guard station. And I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, just doing some pile driving for a new dock, I think it was at the Coast Guard station, oil started coming up. The Coast Guard, unfortunately, and next to the Harbor Master's office, hit an oil spill, for lack of a better word. It was underground. And that initiated an action to find out what was going on here, and the state DEP, working with the responsible party, who was identified at that time to be National Grid. National Grid itself didn't do this. They didn't even exist in this country when these contaminants were released to the harbor. It was just an asset that they had purchased as part of their big conglomeration. When big companies sometimes take something over, you get the good and you sometimes get the bad. In this case, unfortunately, one of the sites that they inherited liability was for a coal tar gasification plant on Harbor Loop, where back in those days, often the easiest place to get rid of your waste coal tar was either in a river, a Housatonic River or Hudson River or Gloucester harbors. It just went into the waterway. And state and federal laws allowed to push for cleanup, and the natural resource agencies discovered this happening as well, which allowed us to start a case for natural resource damages, not for cleanup. Our hat is not cleanup. The natural resource damages trio, our job is to bring the marine environment back for those lost years of functional value of Gloucester Harbor. So there were many years of certain number of acres that were contaminated, assumed damaged, and the modelers, not me, I'm the fish guy, the modelers worked in negotiation. How many years did we, 4, 5?
5 or 6.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years of negotiation, of analyzing the data, looking at contamination levels, making assumptions, determining what impacts were from that coal tar, and coming out with a settlement number. That's kind of it in a nutshell. Here's a couple pictures of the actual cleanup underway that which many of you saw locally, took place for quite some time. I believe it was I can't remember what the cost was, $26 or $46 million cleanup. It was a very expensive cleanup to about 7 acres, I believe they dredged of Gloucester Harbor, and then put a cap over it so it can recolonize. Background, cleanup. I touched on that. Assess contamination and control source. That's kind of behind us, though they're monitoring it for years. Actually, someone told me tonight in perpetuity. I'm not in that loop anymore, but yeah, so years and years of monitoring to make sure the site stays clean and functions as designed. That's not the role we're playing, but that's the background to how we got our funding. Damage assessment and restoration. Again, we assess the extent, the duration of the natural resource injuries to the marine environment in Gloucester Harbor. Collect monetary damages. That's what we did. Our attorneys from Department of Interior, NOAA, and the state, all involved with the attorneys from the responsible party, and came to a negotiated settlement. Restore the injured resources and compensate the public for the losses. That's our goal. Background, natural resource settlements, and this is key, cannot be used to fund required cleanup activities. So a lot of times, people will come into these meetings where we kick these off and say, clean up what's contaminated. Actually, this is very specifically not for cleanup. That is a separate action from state and federal, our own agencies, but a different part of them. Our funding is to bring back habitat that's been degraded, typically from fill and other ways to get planting of resources, but not contamination cleanup sites. Usually that's somebody else's responsibility legally. Natural resource settlement is intended to compensate the public, this is the key, above and beyond the required cleanup. It's not the cleanup, it's above and beyond by restoring the resources that were injured or something similar to them. What are natural resources? I think most of you know, but we're going to touch on it. Biota and their habitats, real simple. Soil and sediment, water, both groundwater and surface water. In this particular case, we don't have a groundwater contamination. The federal agencies don't typically deal with groundwater, but the state can, but there's not a groundwater, drinking water component to this, but there's clearly an in-water component. And air. There's not an air component to this. This is really subtidal benthic habitat and some of the water column above it. But for the most part, our assessment was based on the subtidal marine habitat of Gloucester Harbor. In this lower picture here, some of you recognize that. That's the mill pond, where some of you in this room worked with us for many years, over by O'Malley School. That was a habitat restoration project working in particular with the Gloucester Conservation Commission, the DPW, and the Board of Health all pitched in, and the Shellfish Department worked on that collaboratively to restore, I think it was over 28, in the range of 20 acres, all upstream of the tide gate, which is actually working quite well. And for those of you who don't know it, whenever you go over that bridge near the old sub-store, that's an old dam. It wasn't built as a road, it was built as a dam for tidal energy back in the colonial period that then became a road, and then it became a tide gate for just holding the water back. Now it's open all the time, except in big storms. Example of a natural resource, a sea lamprey in nesting habitat. A lot of the species that we work to restore need small areas, but of high quality habitat for spawning. And that's kind of why I show a picture like that. We don't have sea lamprey. There may be, there shouldn't be any sea lamprey habitat here in Gloucester. Maybe Essex, certainly Ipswich, other larger rivers around here. But just to kind of put a pinpoint, sometimes it's an individual species spawning habitat that we would work to restore. And sometimes, if you want to think about acreage, something like rainbow smelt, which many people recreationally fish for rainbow smelt in Gloucester Harbor and around the Cape Ann area, they only spawn in this area at the head of tide in some of our coastal streams. That's it. There's very, very few locations where rainbow smelt spawn. A little bit in the Little River, a little bit over in Sawmill Brook in Manchester. I've found 7 eggs in Millbrook and Rockport. I mean, they're not in good shape. And they're limited probably more than anything by spawning habitat where they lay their eggs. So sometimes a project can be actually really small, but really important for a particular species. Natural resource services, these are all the things that we touch upon and try to with our projects. It's not going to hit all of them, and some of them are going to be secondary to the primary. Food, fishing, hunting, shellfishing, obviously all that take place around here. Medicinal resources, and in many of our cases across the country, federally recognized tribes would be a 4th trustee council member. In this case, this is not a case where we have a federal trustee tribe in this area that's active on this case, but that's often something that would be focused on. Water, air purification, pest disease control, stormwater retention, carbon sequestration, climate regulation. Recreation often plays a secondary role in many of the projects, whether it's shellfishing, just plain old clean water. You want a clean beach if you want to go swim on it, and spiritual and cultural use. So the services are broad that we incorporate. So when we're evaluating a project, the more services we see may be the reason we prioritize one over another. I touched on this already. Who are the natural trustees for this site? NOAA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Secretary of Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, represented by DEP. Just touching on it again, significant primary injuries to Gloucester Harbor and secondarily to adjacent tidal waters, sediments, and wetlands. There are many contamination sites all throughout, the world. We don't do NRD cases in every contamination site. There's not even, I'm going to get you a list in a moment. They've got to meet cost-benefit ratio also. You don't throw attorneys and resource people from 4 different agencies for a $1,000 settlement. I mean, there's got to be something there of significance. And the Gloucester case certainly came up to that significance level. How the damages were assessed, we quantified the extent of injuries. And that's actually another shop. I'm not a modeler, but we work in a team to assess those injuries. And again, estimating how much it would cost to restore those injured natural resources, develop a claim, and negotiate. So there's a lot of negotiation that went on. We had a consent decree, August 17th, 2023. So just last year was the actual agreement. I think we got the check. And we literally got a check last fall, and it's in an account right now. So it's in the hands of the restorationists. And the result, we have $5.3 million to expend on habitat restoration. The trustee council, I think you saw in the outreach component, is looking at just the Cape Ann area for this. We debated that back and forth a lot and didn't feel that anything here should be far-field. Some cases are much broader. One of the cases I mimicked, even the slideshow, was a case that was not that much more money, 170 miles over a river. I think that, I can't remember how many miles, but sometimes a case will go for miles up a river, and we're looking at projects through a really broad scale area through many towns, municipalities, and counties. In this particular case, just the geography of Cape Ann, the way it's juxtapositions like an island, we felt it would be best to be limited to this particular area. It's not Essex, it's not Ipswich, it's not Beverly. We're focusing on these 4 towns, and I'll get into some of the criteria in a moment. Just a little bit of background over the years. There's a couple of other cases, not that many, but this shows you kind of the, on a sliding scale where this stands with other cases in Massachusetts over the past, I guess, 25 years now, roughly. New Bedford is still number 1, and they're still spending the money. I think they're still making more interest than they're spending, but they're doing a lot of projects down there. But New Bedford at 20 million. Gloucester is kind of on the upper end at 5.3 million. We've had a couple of other smaller cases. I've directly worked on the Island End project case, the Industrialplex, and the Nyanza, and now the Gloucester. So 4 of these are ones that I've worked on. But it just gives you an idea. It's not too often we're doing a case like this, and that's all we could get for that case, $300,000, and Island End is Island End River in Everett, so we did some work up in the Boston area. Next steps. The settlement's finalized. That's done. We're not negotiating anymore. Now what? Working with stakeholders like tonight, starting the process. Our job right now, by law and by desire, because we want input, is to draft a restoration plan incorporating public ideas, our knowledge, nonprofit organizations, the municipalities, ideas of what are appropriate, practical, cost-effective projects to do in this area that we'll be working with a consultant to actually draft the document, but it'll be a lot of our guidance, what's going into it. The project submittal forms that make it in will be incorporated into that document. And then the trustee council, we will kind of sit in a closet and not duke it out, but we'll be haggling over all the project ideas and applying our criteria to figure out which projects we believe meet our criteria best possible. In all honesty, do we want to fund 35 projects? Not a chance. Each project comes with its own administrative work, depending on how it gets funded, how it gets implemented. We're certainly looking for high profile. It's kind of unique to have this kind of money. So we're looking for more larger scale projects that actually restore the habitat equivalency of what was lost in the Gloucester Harbor region. We will look at a range of projects, and then we'll look at ecological, socioeconomic, cultural, historical effects of the restoration projects. We'll look at all the factors, and I have a schedule a little bit later showing that process, but kind of in a nutshell, the restoration plan will be a year out from now. That will go out for draft review, so it'll actually have an opportunity to review the draft, and I can promise you between now and the draft, many of you in this room we will be communicating with to learn more about the project idea. It's not just submit an idea and we'll see you in a year. We will be talking to the City of Gloucester, DPW, if they have an idea, to learn more about it. We want to develop the projects so that they're flushed out, so we're not just doing a best guess. We want projects that work. We want projects that have buy-in. We want projects that actually restore quality habitat for marine species. What types of projects qualify? I'm going to go through some of these. Wetland, salt marsh restoration, restoring hydrology. That's similar to the tide gate that we worked on together with the City of Gloucester on Washington Street. Working on invasive species and restore native plants. Land protection can even fit into a scenario here. And in particular, it would be land protection that has a direct nexus or association with either a project or has some unique factor to it that it benefits the marine environment. I mean, we could make a case that buying 10 acres in the middle of Dogtown is good for the marine environment, but we're looking for clearly a nexus. You know, projects that are in that coastal zone that may actually have a salt marsh component or actually have some restoration that take place on it. So shellfish and eelgrass restoration, projects that improve water quality associated with them. Again, often water quality and reducing stormwater are often secondary benefits of these projects, but sometimes it'll be a primary driver as well. This is Eastern Point. These pictures here, can't remember where that one's from. Oh, that's Mill Pond over by O'Malley School, and that's the Eastern Point Salt Marsh Restoration Project that Audubon worked with Gloucester on. What type of projects qualify? I don't know how many of you have seen that picture, at least at that angle. That's the old water treatment plant over at Little River in West Gloucester, which was sitting there as a sludge lagoon since the 1970s. That sludge lagoon and discharge got built just prior to it not being legal. And it sat there for many years because it was legal when it was built. And then you couldn't do the things that they were doing anymore. You couldn't just discharge stormwater discharges from a water treatment plant into Little River where there are shellfish beds and diadromous fish. But there was an opportunity, and this picture here is a project working again with the city of Gloucester. It took many years to implement this. That's the old fish ladder. Smashed it up, busted it up, made it go away, naturalized the stream. That's the sludge lagoon that used to be intertidal, probably long before the water treatment plant got built. So this was a large, roughly $1 million project. I can't remember the final number, but we restored, and I have some pictures of that as well. Type of projects that we've implemented in this area. Again, stream and river restoration, stream bank stabilization, working with woody debris, dam removal, fish passage, a lot of crossing, sometimes tidal, sometimes freshwater. We have diadromous fish here on Cape Ann, smelt, river herring over in Little River. We certainly have lots of American eel runs, real small ones but in general, but we've got runs and some blockages where fish want and need to get upstream. So those are the type of projects we're also honing in on. What type of projects qualify? For those of you who don't recognize it, that's the legacy. Stubby Knowles built that by hand with other people. There was a wooden fish ladder to get fish up into Lily Pond on the Little River. They got, as I recall, and I was insulted by it because it was EPA that stepped in and gave them something like $3,000 for to build a fish ladder, and they did it, and that lasted for many years. Until it literally just rotted away. And now there's a new fish ladder up there that Division of Marine Fisheries and NOAA all working collaboratively now have a much better fish ladder there, and fish are making it up. And for those that I don't remember the final numbers, but we actually had a fairly decent run of river herring up the Little River this year after a couple of very poor years. So sometimes you get a few poor years, but it's nice to know at least they can make it upstream now. What projects don't qualify, and this is equally important. We've never done probably an NRD case, natural resource damages, where ideas come in that just don't qualify. And we hate to tell people they don't qualify, especially after someone's taken the time to write it down or enter it online or in paper, but it really is important because we don't want anybody to waste their time. But activities that are otherwise required by law or permit. Lots of people have projects that have compensatory mitigation. They need to create some wetlands because they filled some wetlands. We won't fund that. We want above and beyond what's legally required. Site cleanups. If someone has to do a site cleanup, well, that's their job, not this. Site cleanup by somebody else, private, public, or otherwise, is typically a legally required activity. We won't fund that. Required stormwater improvements. I mean, what municipality doesn't have a stormwater problem somewhere? But any of the required stormwater improvements for any of our local permits through state and federal, we just don't touch those. It's things that are net gain above and beyond what was required to be done otherwise. Projects that don't restore same or similar resources. Playgrounds, community gardens, recycling programs, they're all good things. Fully support them, but they're not viable for NRD funds because we don't get more fish usually from a playground. And community gardens are good and they feed people, but we're trying to feed people fish. So if we can get fish growing, that's another way to think about it. We'll work on that community garden. Recycling programs, same thing. Just it's not a direct nexus to the resources that were damaged that we are working to restore. How will project ideas be generated? That's what tonight's all about, getting this kicked off. Natural resource trustees identify and evaluate project ideas from the stakeholders. Public meetings. Project information form, which I hope you all have one. Outreach to local communities. We've reached out to many of the NGOs, trustees of reservations, Mass Audubon. We've reached out to Essex County Greenbelt as well, Manchester Seaside Sustainability, Cape Ann 400, and Cape Ann Climate Coalition, and others. Outreach to agencies and non-government. We've been in touch with the Division of Marine Fisheries, Division of Ecological Restoration, and the other federal agencies. How to submit a project idea. You don't have to be able to read that form, and this is a form that we're only going to use manually with some people that have some trouble with the online. But we do have one. If people need something, we'll work with them. So anyone, even if you have to leave early at any part in this meeting, reach out to us. If at any point in this process you need help with an idea, you have a question, reach out to us. We will help you fill out a form, or we'll answer your questions. We're not going to write it for you, per se, but we will assist you in any way we can to help develop your idea, because the more knowledge we have about your idea, the more prepared we are to evaluate it for the criteria that we're going to apply in this case. How will they be evaluated? Detailed and comprehensive review process. We'll have many, many meetings going through these. We'll bin them to salt marsh, to fish, to outreach. We'll have many bins. We'll slice it. We'll dice it. We've done this many times, and look for, literally for the best projects that seem to fit this area, to fit our needs. We have got guidance that's been used in many other cases, and the federal law associated with the federal laws associated with which allowed this money to materialize. How will the projects be evaluated? This is probably as key as anything here. How physically close is the project to the injured site? You know, that is a goal. We shoot for on-site as reasonable. It doesn't mean we're going to do all these projects in the middle of Gloucester Harbor, because, take my word for it, doing something in the inner harbor would be very difficult in many, many ways, but there may be opportunities there. Extent to which the project restores natural resources that were harmed. Be honest with you, it's not going to be easy in any form or way to restore 30-foot deep subtidal. This is going to be a case where, in many cases, we'll be doing things probably out of kind. So we'll be looking at, so to speak, conversions, shellfish beds, you know, equivalency to some of the subtidal. Is the project feasible and sustainable? And this is where our technical people like myself and Brian and Michelle and others come in. And you know, Peter Phippen, we've worked with Peter for years on projects like this. Feasible and sustainable, and you can get it permitted, really, really matter. The worst thing is to have an idea that just you can't get it to the finish line. So we will be applying that heavily. Do we have a project that can get to a finish line? Cost effectiveness. There'll be a lot of projects that conceptually might be really good, but the cost effectiveness might not be there. 1,000 square feet of salt marsh for $1 million. We could do those, but it's not cost effective. We'll be looking for we want the biggest bang for the buck for the Cape Ann area. What is the likelihood of success? We've all had failures doing this work. We're aware of a lot of them. Some are still to be tested, but our goal is to work on projects that have the highest likelihood of success. Negative effects, we'll be looking at the secondary negative effects to be minimized. And some of that might be social too. I mean, there will be some projects that just hella high water are a negative impact from a social perspective that need to be evaluated. And then, of course, could more than one natural resource benefit? You know, we look for the most benefits out of a single project that you can get. Writing a restoration plan. we're going to be, we have an RFP that we're working on right now to hire a consultant firm that's actually worked on a couple of these with us in just the past decade. We're very comfortable with them, and we will hopefully be having a competitive bid on that soon to work with a firm who has a master service agreement with the state to help us write the plan. And we will be having additional meetings with them during that process with public input. So there'll be probably a kickoff to that. We will then have a draft plan presented to the public for formal comment. We'll be looking for comments on it, and then we will issue a final following comments on the draft. And it will be both our restoration plan and our environmental assessment under the National Environmental Policy Act. It'll cover for both. And within that document, we will identify the preferred scenario, and the preferred scenario might be 5 different projects. It's not just one necessarily. Restoration plan timeline. Tonight, public meeting, project information sheet released. We're asking for comments. We felt 7 weeks is pretty good. You can only go so far, and we wanted to beat the Christmas for everybody. So December 20th, 2024, project information sheets are due. It doesn't mean a project that comes in conceptually can't be developed. We're just looking for the ideas to get the ball rolling. So don't worry about that. We're not looking for project specific. We'll take as much concept or detail as you may have, but we won't be limited to, this is not an RFP, a request for proposals, that you're going to literally compete at this stage. We're going to be looking at ideas. We may actually select a project that has had 0 feasibility, no design, doesn't have a penny, but it's a good project. It might need multiple years to get to the tail end. There may be a project out there that has all its permits and is just waiting for construction funds. So there could be a variety of different type of projects in different stages that this funding we could select. Winter, spring of 25, next spring, we'll be evaluating what comes in throughout this winter. We'll release the draft restoration plan next fall. You know, it'll be an inch thick type of document plus. Fall of 25, about this time next year, public meeting and comment period. And then we hope by the spring of 26 to publish the final restoration plan. I wish it was faster than this. That's what we've learned. The pace takes between all the checks and balances and making sure that we have good transparency and have good public input. We really want that. And in this process with these electronic forms that you'll be able to see what gets submitted on a map for your local area, we hope will add to that transparency so you don't have to literally just wait till the document comes out 6 months later. A lot of this information you'll be able to see periodically as it comes in. Example of natural resource restoration projects, just briefly. A culvert replacement, I think that was up in Maine. 2 perch culverts that salmon couldn't swim up properly, or river herring. Ripped out the 2 culverts, replaced it with a box culvert, restored. Fish had no problem swimming upstream. Wetland restoration projects, you know, tore all this down, creating wetlands. Sometimes it's just straight fill removal. Remove the fill that was dumped there. Here's a great example. Believe it or not, those are the same site. This is from the New Bedford case down in Fairhaven, New Bedford area. All that got ripped up on the left-hand side. It's now a gem. Stream that was partly underground. Fish couldn't get up here. Habitat restoration with trails all throughout it for the public access to an area that was a parking lot and buildings. Absolute success. I don't know if we necessarily have that here or not, but that's a great type of project that we love to have our hands on whenever we can. And again, you know, it takes a few years for them to happen. Trustee contact information, myself, Whitney Bear, Michelle Craddock, and Brian Graber, the kind of your, Kelder, not Graber. This is Brian Graber I work with too. Those are the primary contacts. Will be available. And you've got that information from the sheets that were handed out and were online as well. And I'm not going to take questions yet, but I just want to end with that nice picture. Those are river herring, most likely alewives, and that's what many of us have been working for years now to restore in the Little River. But what I want to do is I'm going to see if I can, all my little icons disappeared here. And Brian's going to come up here and give me a hand again. It's funny, he's working on my computer and I'm working on his. That's the way we got set up tonight.
Eric's typing to them?
Yeah. What I'm going to do is walk you through the nomination form briefly. It's pretty simple, just so you get a flavor of it, so you can have an idea of how this works, and then we'll go to questions and answers.
And I am going to, I'm going to make sure that went up there. And for the folks online, I'm about to share a link that'll take you directly to that form, to that page that you're seeing.
Okay.
We're not seeing it online yet, so I still have to work on that.
So for you in the room, this is what you see online when you go to the online database page. And you can see it says, click here to submit your project. There's not a lot here. It's just a couple pages. You don't have to dig through 50 pages of web page gobbledygook to get to it. It's right up front. Click here to submit your project idea.
No, they see it. Okay.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So basically, this is the page you'll see. And I'm just going to go click it. We don't have to read all. It's just a little bit of background information. Oop. Let's get down there. Should work. And even this is pretty simple. There's not a lot here. Welcome to the former Gloucester Gas Light Company project idea submission form. Let's see if I can do this with a hand scroll. Oop. Well, that's actually the only thing on the first page. Would you like to enter a project or edit an existing project? That's it. And we're going to go over and enter a new project.
You should be able to see it on the screen you're working on, can't you?
I can. Next page.
You can just see what you're doing up there.
Yeah. Pretty simple stuff. And the hard copy you have obviously doesn't have the drop downs, but this is why I wanted to run through. I don't even have to fill this out. It's so simple. I'm just going to walk through you with it. Organization. NOAA. Let's say I'm nominating. Contact name. Eric Hutchins. Title. Whatever I want to call myself. Biologist that day. My address. City. State. Zip code. A phone number for contact. Extension. Email. Organization website, if you have one. And each one of these has a little information dot next to it if you need a little bit more. I don't think we need to dig into those. I think everyone in this room can understand those basic parameters.
And like most online forms like this, you'll see there's a few of them that are required, but a lot of those are, we'd love as much information as you can give us, but if there are things you don't know, you have to do the required ones to get it submitted. We can always follow up with you.
I got to go easy on the scroll. And as you can see, it's just 4 pages. We shrunk it down to 4 pages, pretty basic. Project description. Project title, description. At this point, I'll be perfectly honest with you. If you are someone here that just says, I like salt marshes, please restore salt marshes, that's acceptable. That's not what we're looking for per se, but we're looking for public comment. We'd love to hear Wingasheek Beach, Salt Marsh Restoration Project, or Good Harbor Beach, or Singing Beach, whatever. We'd love to hear specifically as much detail as you have, but don't hesitate if you just have a concept, because that'll help guide us on what the public's interests are. If 50 people chimed in and said, protect the island off of Good Harbor Beach, well, gee, it's real popular. People really want to protect the island off of Good Harbor Beach. It'll just give us some direction to think about and to dig in a little bit deeper. Any ideas that morph out of the plan, obviously these will turn into documents later. We're looking for the concepts or as much detail as you have. Okay. Oops. Oh yeah, that is it. Project size and location. I'm not sure if I can do with this scroll or not. So you just go over here, map of the United States. You get a choice of a dot, a point. You can draw a line. You can draw a polygon. You can do it however you want. I don't care if you put a dot at Good Harbor Beach. It's just a dot and said, this is where we want to do habitat restoration, or Annisquam River, shellfish restoration, or this zone of Gloucester Harbor, eelgrass restoration, we know where to do it. I mean, however, whatever level of detail you have, you can use this. And we'll see if we can get this to blow up properly. Come on. Oh, now we're in South America. This part, I did not practice on the hand scroll. Maybe I won't, I might not be able to give you the, yeah, no mouse. We'll see. Oh, I don't think I can get it over there.
We're not going to fund projects in Guatemala.
No.
Likely. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can do this with this mouse. But it's a map. Just blow it up. It'll, like many maps we've all worked with now, you'll just hone in on the 4 towns. If you got something Rockport, Gloucester, Essex, or Manchester, you can find your spot. Dot, line, polygon, whatever you want. You can circle it, dot it, do as much description as you can. I'm not going to bore you with technical things we can't do with this computer right now. Got some tips. Use the pan, zoom tools. There's a bunch of little tools there. If any of you need help, call us. Having a problem with it, we'll work with you on it. Location description is an example. Yeah, the John Smith National Wildlife Refuge. Could say Pavilion Beach, whatever. However you want to describe it, the best you can with as much detail. Real basic. Latitude, longitude, it'll actually fill automatically. You don't even have to put it in there. When you put your dot in it, it'll actually pre-fill it. Project size, if applicable, if you, 5 acres of salt marsh we're trying to restore, if you don't have anything, that's okay. Affected area, acres, project size, you can put whatever you want in these, whatever you feel is appropriate about your project. If it's a shellfish restoration, we're going to try to do 1 acre, just write an acre. Boop. Real simple. Project activities, debris removal, maintenance management, education, habitats. It's just click on the type that you're working with or interested in. Resource benefits. Just click all of them. You're not going to have, I don't think we're going to hit any corals, but you potentially could hit all of them. I don't expect to see any reptile or amphibian projects, but in all honesty, there could be one. Because there's actually a vernal pool located right next to the Little River Fish Ladder that actually feet away from it. I remember I used to see the eggs there all the time. So it was something that got protected in the process of doing that project. But I'm not expecting that here. But it's not out of the question. But I don't expect coral.
Yeah, and Eric, probably worth pointing out, the reason there's so many options on there is this same form is used for projects across the country. So it's clearly, as you'll see looking at this, some of these are more applicable to the injuries that Eric described than others.
Estimated cost. Oop, I went a little too low. Estimated cost. Some projects are underway and just need more help. Do you actually have any funding already underway in place? Estimated costs, who the partners are. A coalition of partners always helps a project. When someone just throws an idea, but no one really is a leader or cares about it other than it's just an idea, it doesn't carry as much weight versus Gloucester DPW wants this done, the local Concom loves it, and the local nonprofit wants to sponsor it. Coalitions make projects. So keep that in mind. Partner contact, partner involvement, and then down below, you can submit 1 PDF document. And if you have more, reach out to one of us, you can give us 10. I mean, it's just the way this form's set up. If you've got a single PDF document associated with your project that already exists, include it. So I spent more time, all of 5 minutes on this, and you can see how simple it is. It's a pretty basic form. And it'll self-populate a database, so we'll actually have spreadsheets of all the projects, and they'll actually be mapped. And so it'll be really good for us organizationally to also work with the consultant that's hired to go through these rather than hand pieces of paper and everything. It'll allow us to be a much more efficient process. That's it for the formal part of the presentation. And we'll jump to questions and answers. But before I do that, I want to ask any of my colleagues, I'm positive I missed something. It could be any of you. Before we jump to Q&A, do you feel like we need to get on the table?
I just have a couple really basic things about the form. One, we ran into this the other day in testing it. It's our first run through this form too. You'll see that says drag and drop PDF. You actually have to, like, from a file explorer, drag it and drop it. There isn't a dialogue to, like, go through. So there's just drag the thing over, drop it in there, it'll upload. And I think there's a 20 megabyte limit. So like Eric said, if you run into trouble with that, you don't have to start shrinking things crazy. If you have something, you can get it to us another way. Just make a note and we can follow up with you. I think that was it. Oh, and one last thing on this. When you submit, there is from that initial page I think we started on, there's a way to look at the submitted projects. It will not show up immediately because it has to go through a QC on our end to make sure that, frankly, make sure it's appropriate to go up. Yeah. So if you put it in, it does have to go through a QC just to make sure that they can be uploaded, and then we'll push send. So it might take a few days for it to show up on there, or a week to show up, but it will go in as you wrote it, as long as you didn't write something offensive or completely out in left field.
Michelle Whitney or anybody else of our team? Michelle?
I'll just do something quick. Yeah, I think you did a great job covering everything, Eric, but I think a lot of our NRD projects, we really try to kind of maximize how far our money goes. So a lot of our big projects, they do get a lot of other grant funds, and we really try to leverage additional funds. The NRD funds are kind of unique because they're considered settlement funds. A lot of them do get routed through the state and can then be used kind of as the match towards federal grants. The state considers them settlement funds, so they can be used as match towards state grants. So they're really flexible that way, and they can go a lot further, because 5.3 is a lot of money, but if you do have a really big project, I mean, a big project can cost billions of dollars. So we really try to kind of tap all those resources. And another thing with the NRD funds is that they're in a trust account. They're not tied to fiscal years like a lot of other grant programs. So we have the ability to kind of, like Eric said, take these projects kind of from initiation and feasibility and conceptual design all the way through construction. So just wanted to add that.
And actually, that's a super valuable point. I'm going to re-emphasize it. Everybody wants a project. When I was saying about buy-in, this is match money, which often municipalities and nonprofits don't have. This can be your match money for other grants. If you have a project idea, it can be priceless to have if you get lined up with some of this funding. We love to see a $200,000 piece draw in another 100 or 200,000, and potentially at no cost to the sponsor, because you're using this funding as the non-federal match. We actually have many projects that use NRD funds and then apply to NOAA for our grants. Totally legitimate. It's been, we've established that quite well legally. So it is an option that we really want anyone to be thinking about, is stretching this out and potentially making this $5 million, $7, $8 million worth of benefits for the Cape Ann area. Okay, now it's your turn. Peter.
Eric, is match being part of the evaluation? Is that?
Not formally.
Okay.
Match, there is no criteria. There are many projects over NRD that sometimes have zero match, and it's not a criteria. But I'll be honest with you, match shows, in many cases, buy-in, collaboration, and hope and knowledge that a project will actually go to completion. Sometimes we all know this. If you just throw money at something and look the other way, and no one really is working it to make that project happen. So that is where match comes in more than anything, is we're just looking for buy-in. Yeah. When someone's there, and even if it's just sweat equity.
And are all aspects of the project funding, like if you're trying to develop the research, the assessment, evaluation, that type of thing, in project development?
I'll be honest and say that the research side is certainly more limited. This is not a research funding program, but monitoring assessment, yes. And there's a fine line at times between monitoring and assessment and research, but this is not a research program.
Project development?
Yep. Feasibility, I mean, full-blown feasibility. If someone said, I got a great idea, but it needs a lot of work, we need sediment testing, we need to do historic review before we even apply for a permit, absolutely legitimate.
And
Full.
my final question, for now anyway, is the project geography is Cape Ann, but it's not limited to a project being in one of the 4 communities. It can be in multiple communities or more.
Yep.
Okay, and it can be separate projects in multiple communities or one that spans a border.
Could be, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no line drawn in the sand yet other than we've just limited it to Cape Ann.
Okay, all right, thank you.
What is the area, the geographic area, that the restoration plan will cover? And is there any entity, other than the trustees, who will have to endorse or approve that plan?
The geographic area is the 4 Cape Ann communities. So right now, I guess the line in the sand is the municipal border between Essex and Ipswich and Hamilton, Wenham, and Manchester. So that is the geographic area. I don't think we're going 10 miles offshore because we haven't really figured out what to do out there yet, but it's the 4 Cape Ann communities. The approval process of projects will be, we'll be making advice, but it'll be our higher-ups within our agencies. In the end, we'll be making decisions on the final document. So it'll be U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Interior, NOAA, Massachusetts. So those are the 3 decision makers in the process. As far as funding, I didn't touch on this. Projects can actually move forward many ways. Sometimes they're through solicitations. Sometimes the state we've done this before. State's doing a culvert solicitation. We've actually just added money to it and said, hey, if any projects come in these 2 towns, that we've done that before. We've funded towns directly to do a project through municipal services agreements. Sometimes NOAA will take the lead. We'll use our master service agreement and do the design, permitting, entirely for no work for anybody else, Fish and Wildlife Service. So there's a variety of mechanisms that can be used. We don't know what will be used yet.
And a follow-up question on what was just asked. So, like Essex Bay is sort of a natural resource unit. So if you're looking at restoring something in that area and it happens to span into Ipswich, is that allowable?
Well, I mean, if we do something in downtown Gloucester Harbor, I'm going to contend that it actually helps Ipswich because we're restoring the marine environment. But the bottom line is we're not leaning in that direction. Okay. If someone does something good in Gloucester or Essex and it helps Ipswich, that's not negative points, that's positive. But we're not looking to do projects in Ipswich.
Okay. But if it's like, for instance, an eelgrass bed that spans the habitat area is in both Ipswich and Essex, you know what I mean?
I do. I guess I would give you the lean right now to, we're targeting the 4 communities, so but maybe that would be the match. We found some funding for the Ipswich side of the bed, and here's the other side. I don't have a definitive answer, but we're clearly focusing on the 4 communities, because that principle could leapfrog and leapfrog and leapfrog. Oh, it's the Great Marsh. Why don't we do something in Merrimack, because the fish up in the Merrimack River do come to. That's what we're trying to stay focused on, Cape Ann.
Gotcha.
Andy?
Yeah, Andy Rosenberg, Mass Oyster Project. The couple of things that you touched on briefly, just want to ask a little more about. All of these projects look like they're likely to be partnerships.
Yep.
And I can't imagine very many of them aren't going to partner with either the city or one of the towns. Are you going to help make some connections for organizations as you go through these lists? And
We started it tonight.
yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I guess I'm asking, do you want us to do that and say we've already got a fully formed partnership, or are you going to sort of facilitate some of that?
There will probably be a little bit of both. It'll depend on the level of time and energy we have to put into it as well, but it'll be a little bit of both. By all means, we want it. We'll try to facilitate it wherever we can, and we'll support it.
The second part is that while the approval is from the resource agencies, many, if not all of the projects require some kind of permitting, probably both city, town, or state, possibly feds. How are you going to handle that in terms of facilitating us to get through the permitting process, which is a big hurdle for a lot of groups?
In almost all cases, whenever we're implementing a project, we're hand-holding all the way through. I mean, that's kind of the technical services we bring to the table. We will work with an applicant if they're leading it. In many cases, if someone's got a consultant that you've hired, say the city of Gloucester has a master service agreement with some consulting firm that is doing the project, we're going to be at those meetings. Unless you don't want, we want to see the project succeed. We'll bring our skill set to the table to help with technical guidance, regulatory guidance. We also have to do our own internal. Even if we give you money and it's not we're leading the project, it's still a federal action in some ways. So we actually have to still do federal compliance as part of transferring the money.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of small organizations, including the one I'm here on behalf of, permitting expertise is tough, even though I used to do this stuff, so.
It's tough for us too.
Yeah, it's tough for everybody, so that, it is a fairly important component.
Yep.
And then finally, when do you anticipate a real call for proposals? Is it after the plan is done, or is it in the course of the plan?
It's in the course of right now starting. Yep.
But this is a call for ideas, not a call for a formal proposal, right?
And we're not going to actually ask for formal proposals. They will morph, to be honest with you. That's the way this will work. This is getting project ideas in, and it's not a formal competition. So this is not a request for proposals. This is the agencies implementing this. We want to get as much as we can. There may be some projects here that are fully baked, ready to go. They may skyrocket to the top. Others may have a great idea that needs feasibility funding to get there. We'll work with those entities through our years of experience, hopefully to tease out the best ones, the best partnerships to make them happen.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
You say ma'am or mayor?
I said mayor, but I saw your hand earlier.
Look, to follow up on what was just asked and what you said about it's not a competition, I would, looking around the room, I'm suspecting that a lot of projects might be on public property, and we have our own list too.
Yep.
So it'd be smart if people connect with my office and I'll connect with the community development department, because even though it's not a competition, it kind of could be redundant.
Yeah.
And we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot and, compete indirectly. So I think if we hear from you guys what you have in mind, we would sort of have a formal team effort to make it happen.
Right.
No sense in us putting an application for X, and we're also getting somebody else's application for X.
Right.
And then we're talking after the fact, so it might be a little too late.
It-
Sure, there's a December 20th deadline.
I'll also say, additional project ideas will morph through our restoration planning process. December 20th is our kickoff to this. It's not as though after December 20th, no additional ideas. No, we're going to be going out to sites, doing site visits, looking at them. 9 out of 10 times I go do a site visit and I learn there's a better project right there that no one even knew about. That may turn into a major project that everyone loves. So this is not a deadline specific. We may have a concept that someone puts in that has nothing on it yet, but we go out and look at it. It needs to be developed. And it may turn into something completely different than what you originally put in, but it may be a better project for everybody involved. So it's not that deadline is not such that we don't ever want to hear from anybody again. We'll see you in 9 months. This will be an iterative process throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, Eric, I just wanted to ask you a question about one of your slides. You showed a slide of a paved area that then became a wetland.
Yeah.
Could you give us a little background on that? I mean, was that land privately owned, and was there?
That's for Steve. Steve, the New Bedford project. Give us the 2-sentence rundown on that beautiful project.
That land was privately owned by a corporation that owned a mill on the property and a big milling operation. The land was purchased by a land trust with funds from the New Bedford Harbor Dark case. And then once it was owned by the land trust, we went in and we removed all the parking lots and all the pavement. It restored a more natural environment for fish and for other critters with the funds from the New Bedford Harbor Trustee Council.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good.
Eric, my understanding of how the website's gonna work is that when you're submitting information, how much of that information are we gonna be able to see? I'm thinking about what the mayor and National Oyster Project was talking about, that if we're able to see the information and be able to, do you want us to use the website to add on our voice to that sort of thing, or do you want us, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so that is actually one of the values of this, which we actually haven't used this before, this group working together, where this information will actually be available on a map, and you'll actually see contact and the conceptual. So it'll actually facilitate some of that very communication you're talking about. So if there's a project idea that gets nominated by one person and says, hey, let's restore this salt marsh at Good Harbor Beach, and the city has one that's in there also, well, either I'm going to call the two of you, or you're going to call each other and say, we got to work together. That's a new beneficial component of doing this electronically, and with the map that you will be able to actually see the projects and who has what the project is.
Though I'm pretty sure, like, the personal contact information, I don't think is
Oh, okay.
a public-facing page. I'd have to double-check that.
But-
I'm pretty
Your
sure.
organization.
But you're,
Yeah.
but it's a small enough area that you'll be able to make the contact
Yep.
and follow up on that, yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Chris?
Another geographically oriented question. You made a point earlier that seemingly you would give priority to sites that were in closer rather than farther proximity to the original site. Suppose I had a project that wasn't very close, but fit your criteria beautifully otherwise, a wetland, all of the things you mentioned. Should I forget about that, or is that worth submitting?
What you just described, I would absolutely put in. And then it gets worked out later, meaning we can't say at this point. I just don't know. But certainly, now.
It's not automatically disqualified.
No, it's the opposite. Now, if someone said, I have a real weak project at the farthest extreme of this geographic area, I'd say, well, don't write a lot. Get it in and we'll. But if you're telling me I got a great project and it's in our zone, we're going to take a peek at it. But if it was, let's just say it had 3 acres of functional benefit, I'm just going to use a metric, and we had a project closer, a lot closer, that was 3 acres of functional benefit, kind of leans towards the one by definition that's closer. But if it's 10 acres and farther away, and this one's only 1, well, we're going to look real serious at that farther away one.
Or potentially if it involves more elements.
Yeah. Yep.
More habitat, kinds of habitat,
Yep.
species,
Yep.
et cetera, might raise it up a bit.
Yeah. And obviously, I'll be frank, one of the hard starting points of all of this is when we use that criteria, urban, and I mean when I say urban, I'm talking about a designated port area. Urban restoration at ground zero is the most expensive and some of the most difficult habitat So our starting point is it's not easy to do habitat restoration in Gloucester Harbor. Permits, cost, even if you wanted to buy, what would an acre of land cost in the harbor if you wanted to do something? Exorbitant, and then you got to clean it up because there might be something in the soil. So the interesting thing about this site is we're going to almost certainly be away from the inner harbor in some of these projects by definition, because it's just too hard to do anything there.
But you could have a project that had a component, an educational component that's right at the site.
Yep.
The Maritime Center, even though the in the water part was a little farther distant, and it's still proximity, I assume you're not going to just say we're the in the water part.
You're absolutely right. Yep.
I have an online question I could share with you.
Oh, yeah, we have an online question.
So I believe you mentioned these funds wouldn't cover site cleanup. If a project would likely need cleanup first before these funds may be able to be used, would a project like that be considered? For example, Good Harbor Beach Creek area.
Potentially. And that would be more of the question that came in was if a site needed cleanup before it could be restored, would that be viable? And the answer to that would be the viability of the project, meaning from our experience, site cleanups sometimes take decades to actually get done. We would have to evaluate. If someone said, we have a cleanup that's actually been funded, it'll be done in a year from now, and then we want to do above and beyond the cleanup, sure, that would be a viable. But the difficulty with the cleanup is the practicality. That would be my quick answer to that. But it certainly could be viable.
On species, would you be mostly looking for native species that were most prolific here and not just ancillary species that were, on the fringe of being here to restore habitat?
I think the answer, well, it depends. If it's native, that's what we're targeting. We certainly don't want to restore green crabs or anything. The answer is yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then, we're also, one of the criteria was success criteria. If we're going way out on a limb for a species that's right on the edge, that needs it, and we think we can do something, that'd be one thing. Or if we're trying to restore a species that this is going to be so difficult, the chances of success is so low, that's going to also work against a project. So keep in mind, a species that doesn't even exist here anymore, someone's going to have a really well-developed plan. Hey, we're going to restore Atlantic salmon to the river. Okay, maybe one swam up there 200 years ago. But we do get stuff like that. And in some locations, it does make sense. So it'll be weighed out. I wouldn't put my eggs in the basket of that concept. But if you have an idea, it doesn't hurt. You can pick up the phone, send an email. Hey, Eric, I got an idea. Don't waste time if you think you've got one. Any one of us would be happy to give you some input.
And you're not limited to one idea here.
Oh, yeah?
Any ideas you have, but throw the spaghetti at the wall at this point, as long as it makes sense.
Eric, a lot of these potential projects may involve public trust resources. Is there any opportunity for the public to advise or recommend or take part in the decision of these projects?
Yeah, actually, this process will be somewhat part of that process. So our ideas are being generated partly from the public. It'll be from us as well. So we're trying to get as much transparency and input. The plan that we develop will have a public comment period, and we have to respond to those comments. So, if a lion's share of comments come in and say, we hate that project, we don't want anything to do with that, and we don't want you, we're going to listen. I mean, to a certain degree. So there absolutely is a desire and a process for public input all the way through.
On that note, I have a question about how do you navigate today's public input climate that can give a larger voice to a very small minority.
I'd have to think about that one for a little bit. I have answers, but they're up here. They need to morph a little bit more. We will do our best to respect any input, and we will do our best to met out the time to anybody that wants to provide comment. And as Brian said earlier, projects that are nominated by Mickey Mouse and Frankenstein over Halloween will potentially be not thrown away, but they will not make it onto the webpage. We will be evaluating for nonsense. If something is nonsense or is just,
I was thinking more of the after comments, the comments on specific projects that might be in somebody's, might infringe on their
all right.
thing, and they've got a following that they.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So a little bit later. We expect that. In this world, I don't mean even this world. In this arena of work, there is almost always some entity, rightfully in many cases, wrongfully in others, that love and sometimes hate a project. And that will be part of the permitting process and the public input to figure out, is it the right project? And we'll be considering those too. If we got a project, sometimes we see dam removals and we'd love to remove the dam, but there's 100 houses on the lake with their pier ramp float. Yeah, we might be able to get to the permitting process, but we're probably not going to succeed. So we look for practicality of political, it's not political, it's just reactionary bombs that could happen on a project. Many of them have it, unfortunately. And we will be cognizant of those, and we'll try to actually avoid them unless sometimes the project's too good. Like this project is worth fighting for with the proponent. Peter?
Speaking of permitting, is permitting covered with this funding?
Yep, soup to nuts. Feasibility, design, permitting, construction oversight, potentially depending on the project and the partner, and post-restoration monitoring. Most projects usually have a 2, 3, or sometimes more years of required or desired monitoring. It can cover all aspects of a project, depending on the circumstances. Any more hands?
Oh, hold on.
Nope.
Hold on. Will you be assessing all the projects through the lens of future climate change predictions?
Will you be evaluating all projects through the lens of projected climate change? And the simple answer to that is yes. We'll certainly be looking at current and predicted changes. Because if you're doing habitat restoration, if you don't consider changes to sea level rise, for example, you'll set your grades all wrong if you're doing some marsh work. Or if you're trying to grow shellfish at a certain elevation, and 5 years from now or 10 years from now, you've planted them too low. So absolutely. That'll impact some projects more than others. But it also could make a case where land protection, that's where a land protection piece could kick in. We've got an area that is prone to future sea level rise and will convert to salt marsh. So we'll look at opportunities also, not just constraints. Any more online in the chat?
No. All's quiet on the chat front.
I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. And like I said, a number of us are going to be here for as long as any of you may even have some after meeting. You want to come up and talk to me. We're going to set up some brief tables. And if you choose to all run out the door, that's understandable as well.
Before I sign off online, is there any last thing we want to tell the folks that joined us online as far as next steps?
Yes, I will. I will do my best to say to everybody online, in case you missed any of this, and there are many reasons we all miss bits and pieces when we're watching things online. I've been there many times, sometimes a cup of coffee or something else. Please reach out to us. It's easier to absorb everything being here in person. But if anything that you heard this evening that you want some clarification on, please reach out to us. And we'll be more than happy to give you some follow-up. And that applies to everybody in this room as well. Oh,
I think we were going to send out an email after this with a link to that project information form.
Yep.
And a link to the website for everyone here. So people online, we haven't emailed you. Make sure they put their contact info in the chat box.
Yes.
Eric?
Yep.
Website said it was due the 19th, you said it was due the 20th.
Oh, yeah, I did notice that at one point today. So
For the procrastinator.
for the procrastinator, for the record, it's the 20th. It's a Friday instead of a Thursday. It's perfectly okay. I mean, you're not going to lose anything, It's not a grant process. We're looking for your ideas.
Is the PowerPoint going to be available?
Yes. Yep. Well, and we're going to post this whole presentation with the PowerPoint, and we can make the PowerPoint itself available to anybody that wants. We'll have that posted on our webpage. You can download it, do whatever you want with it. Great.
Thanks for reaching out.
All right. Thank you.